My name is Jerome Ferry. My cameraman is Alan Eggers. We're doing a video interview with Donald Thompson of Marion, Iowa, a World War II veteran and a Linn County farmer for many years. Don, tell us what year you were born in and where you were born.
I was born the 28th day of September 1924 on a farm 2 miles east of Alburnett. And my parents were Margaret and Tom Thompson.
And what was your occupation of your dad?
He was a farmer. Well, when he came over from Denmark, he laid tile and one thing. He first went to Nebraska, but he said, awful lot of good country back here in eastern Iowa. He said, I think I'm going back here. And that's why he came back here to settle.
Did you have any brothers and sisters?
I have one sister, and she's retired, of course.
Did your dad, as you think back now, did he have any problem in adjusting to farm life in Iowa compared to Denmark?
No, I enjoyed this a lot to the fact that when we went over to Denmark and seen where he was born and raised, part of the country where he came from reminded me an awful lot of Iowa, and that's the reason why he liked it here. And when he got to this country, he says, no, we do not speak Danish here. We're Americans. We speak English. And he was very firm about that.
And did your dad have milk cows? And
we had a full complex of things. We had cows, chickens, pigs, and the whole thing. And well, back then, the eggs, that was grocery money for the farmers on the farm. So we went through some rough times back there. And when I moved to town, I moved off of the farm where I was born.
So you probably shocked oats and...
Yes, I have. Even with a pitchfork, because some of them had Canadian thistles on them.
Mowed hay in the in the barn. And
yeah. Now, they always thought my dad was a little bit crazy. We had one of the first combines and had one of the first balers in the country, and they thought Tommy had lost his thinking right when he done that.
Your dad must have been quite progressive then, if in his thinking.
He was. He was not a good mechanic, but we had about 300 acres to farm back at that time. That's a lot of ground.
Is that farm still in existence?
Yes, it is. Yeah, we when I went to the service, we rented one farm, and my dad owned the other farm, or was paying for it. And so then when I went to the service, we had to let the one farm go then, and if I'd have stayed home, I probably could have got a military exemption and not had to go to the service. But I wanted to fly airplanes.
So where'd you go to school, grade school in Alburnett?
In Alburnett, yes. Yeah, I graduated there in 1942.
In high school?
Yeah.
Yeah. When you were going to high school, did you ever have any ambitions to go to college at that time? Or?
Well, I think the only thing that I'd commented on is that I wanted to fly airplanes. And, of course, your thinking changed an awful lot a year before I graduated, because December 7th, 1941 changed the route that a lot of us were going to go down in our lifetime.
When you were in high school, did you have any idea what you wanted to be? Did you think you would end up being a farmer someday, or an airline pilot? Or?
Well, I was not one of the smartest boys, because even the superintendent said that about me when I got a chance to get into the Army Air Corps. Fine, he's going to have a chance, but he doesn't have what it takes to make it. But I proved him wrong.
You must have had a early interest in airplanes as a child.
I remember the first airplane that I got, I think I was about 5 years old. And it's interesting right now because Lindbergh's, something had just flown the Atlantic, and the first plane I had was the Spirit of St. Louis model of that airplane. And I remember when you pushed it, the propeller turned and it made an awful racket, and my mother got rid of the racket in a hurry.
Did you ever get a plane ride as a child?
I went down to, I think it was the old Hunter Airfield here in Cedar Rapids, and flew with a fellow. His name was Chamberlain. I think he was one of the fellows that flew across the Atlantic Ocean once in a trimotor airplane. It was a Ford trimotor is what I rode in. Yeah.
You said you graduated in 42. Would that have been in the spring of 42?
Yes.
And then in December, the prior year, when Pearl Harbor got bombed, did that instill a desire in you that you were going to do something?
Well, I had been taking some correspondence stuff about airplanes and things like that. My mother had convinced that I had enough interest that I could do that. And so they opened it up then to allow some 17 and 18-year-olds to enlist in enlisted reserve into the Army Air Corps as it was at that time.
Did you have any buddies at that time that joined you, or did you?
No, I was the only one. We had one person that graduated, went to school at Albert for a while, and they moved to Canada, and he was in the Canadian Air Force, and he came back and talked to me. I was in high school once.
So where did you end up taking your basic training then?
Well, when I passed the physical test to get into the enlisted reserve in the Air Corps, then they sent me a letter, the first of the year in ⁻43, and I was told to report to the old federal building in Des Moines, and then I went to Jefferson Barracks. Beautiful place to spend a winter for a month or so.
And did you sign on as a pilot, or was this determined later that
This had to be determined later as we went through. First we had to go down there, learn which was our left and right foot so we could march and something get our shots. Then they sent us to college for 5 months. And if I had not had a fever, I would have went to co-college here in Cedar Rapids. That might have been bad because I'd have been too close to home. But I went to Moorhead State up in Minnesota first. It was like Marion and Cedar Rapids because Moorhead is one side and Fargo was on the other.
Mm-hmm. And you were at the Hunter Field in Savannah, Georgia.
Yes.
Was this Hunter Field had any connection with the?
That was where the 8th Air Force was originated.
But it had no connection with the Hunter Airport, the old Hunter Airport in Cedar Rapids.
No.
So,
in fact, I have over here the flight plan when I picked up the new B-17 at Hunter Field to fly up to start my trip across the Atlantic Ocean. Mm-hmm. I still have that flight plan and the weather briefing that they gave me.
Mm-hmm. So what type of planes did you get to train in?
Well, I started flying in Orion. It was a 165 horsepower engine on the thing, and it was a good plane to learn to fly, and it was a lot of fun.
And now, when you started flying in this plane, was this your first exposure to?
This is the first time I was at the control. Mm-hmm. No, we had 10 hours when we were in college training detachment, but that one all we did was rectangular turns and one thing. But I did see my first military plane, a P-39 at that time, and I thought, I was thinking more in terms of a tank rather than there's just aluminum tin can around you, not much protection.
And when you were doing this training, did you have any idea of what you could possibly be training for, what you would be assigned to?
I had always wanted to fly a P-38. I had built models of those when I was through high school and one thing and another, and I even had built a model of a German Stupid dive bomber. And it's interesting to note that I would see some of those in real life a few years later.
Did you? So, when did you get assigned to your B-17?
Well, this took a long process, really, because we had to go through the classification center out there. We had a lot of things we had to pass there, and all kinds of psychomotor tests, and to see if you try to put square blocks in round holes and this type of thing. And then we learned a lot of aircraft identification code, this type of thing. Then and on the tests that you took and the score you made, I qualified then to be either a pilot, navigator, or bombardier. There was no choice. I was going to be a pilot because I wanted to fly a P-38.
Mm-hmm. And so how did it progress?
Well, as I went into Ryan's, then I sold that in 8 hours, and I went on to the BT-13. I sold it in 6 hours, and the check ride on that, I think, is what determined that, is I was flying with an Air Force check pilot, and I went up and flew nothing outstanding, but he says, all right, take me down. And that was it. And I didn't like his tone of voice. I said, I think we blew it. I don't know. But then, so I had done the usual thing. We slowed down, cracked the canopy a little bit, and pumped down so many degrees of flap and started general gliding down. He said, I want down right now. So I just cleaned everything up. I split S and went right down. And I happened to hit the right spot where you're supposed to enter 45-degree overhead approach. and I got on the ground, and that's what got me. Then they put me in twin engine, in basic. They'd never done this before. This was a UC-78. So then I went from 250 horse up to 500 horse on that.
Had you did anything wrong that disturbed them, or?
I just didn't think I'd done anything outstanding, even though I knew I could do better snap rolls than my instructor could. But at that point in time, you have to remember that the war had been going on for quite a while, and their need for pilots was starting to lessen, and competition was pretty keen. And I think we lost 35-40% of the guys that I went in with that were no longer in pilot training.
You mentioned you pumped the flaps down.
They were hydraulic. And if you went down too far, you could drop them all at once. And the BT-13 was a very unforgiving airplane. And
so every time you wanted to change the angle of your flaps, you had to pump the hydraulic?
Almost like a jack that you'd have under your car. And only if you pushed way down, it released it all. And you didn't want to do that until you're ready for it.
Didn't that cause you to have one hand available
Yes.
for those flaps at all times?
Well, you run the flaps, the throttle, the mixture, and prop control with your left hand and flew with your right hand.
Okay.
And I changed back and forth from different, depending on the airplane that I flew.
Mm-hmm. So when did you get your first assignment in crew?
Then when I graduated the 4th of August in 1944, and I found out I wasn't going to get to go to P-38s. They wanted an instructor. Instead, P-61 is what I was headed for then. And they had put me in advance to fly B-25s. And I soloed that thing in 8 hours. And so then when we ready to graduate, I said, no, I don't want to be an instructor. And then there was opening for, I think, 7 or 8 of us. We went to B-17 transition down at Hobbs, New Mexico. And I didn't solo that one in 8 hours like I did all the rest of them, because you had to have 50 hours before you could fly that solo. And then I completed training there. Then when I completed that, they wanted me to put me in 29s. I said no, I didn't want them, because there was a field next to me that had 29s, and they had a lot of engine trouble with them at the beginning, fires and blown engines, and so I said I'll stick with the 17, and so that's what I did. And then finally I got sent to Lincoln, Nebraska, where I picked up my crew. Mm-hmm. And then we went to Dyersburg, Tennessee, where we had our crew training, and we completed our crew training down there in Dyersburg, Tennessee.
This crew that you were assigned to, would this have been the crew that you knew you were going to eventually end up with?
They were going to be the crew that I was going to keep, with one exception on that. And a buddy of mine, we went through training, from basic flight training on through, and even in transition to 17s. And he got a bombardier and I didn't. And I got an armored gunner instead. But when we got to our crew training, we picked up a bombardier who had been there to us, and they double trained them. So then I picked up a bombardier, and he lost his bombardier. And so I had some fun with him over that.
Was there any Iowans in the
This
crew?
was the joy of it. When we completed our training down there in 17s, we were one of the top 3 crews. And we were then given at our choice a cross-country of our own choice. Well, we knew we were going to go to Iowa, because I was from, right close here to Cedar Rapids, little town of Alburnett. And my navigator was from Eagle Grove, Iowa, and my co-pilot was from Hamburg, Iowa. So we had a flight plan all planned. We were going to move those towns a little bit, but the weather prevented us, and probably was a good thing.
Did the size of the B-17, did it overwhelm you or intimidate you, or were you fairly accustomed to large planes by then?
This is the interesting thing. When I got into transition with the B-17 down at Hobbs, I went up on about my second flight with an instructor, and we were flying formation. And I tucked it in real tight and close, and he kind of loosened his seat belt and slid back. He says, well, where are you going from here? You must be about done with your training here. I said, no, sir, this is just my second flight. He tightened up his seat belt and got a little closer. What you been flying before? I said, B-25s. He said, that explains it. And so that helped an awful lot. One thing about it, in the flying the B-25s, I was the only one that completed what they call a 90-degree intercept on when we had a cross country, and I was the only one out of the graduating class that had done that. And so I must have been better than what I thought I was.
So what rank were you then when you were assigned to a plane and you got a crew? What rank?
I was a second lieutenant.
Second lieutenant.
Yeah.
And would you like to hold that picture up of what young Donald Thompson looked like?
This is what I looked like when I was flying the Ryan and then went on to the rest of the planes that I flew. And I had a young boy that I'd seen these pictures of the other day, and he says, "You changed an awful lot from the time in a year and a half." I think it made us grow up kind of quick. But
and then this picture here, is that a picture of your?
This is a
your
picture
crew?
of my crew. This is actually taken over in England, and is of my crew, and it is taken in front of the damn Yankee, the plane that we flew over there in Europe.
Mm-hmm.
It was a plane that flew 96 missions without an abort.
Which one are you on there?
Yes, I'm
Point
this
it.
one here. On the, it'd be on your right, on the
Point again. I think I missed it. Yeah.
right
Okay.
up over here.
Okay. Very good.
Now there's a bigger one over here of that, if that would help. But then-
I got close.
Good. And that there is the.
That's a picture of a V-17. That happens to be an F model, but it was an awful nice picture, and so it tells the story of what a V-17 looked like. But most of them that I flew after I got through with training were G models.
And these your patches.
This is our bomb group squadron patch for the 545th Bomb Squadron, and this is the patch for the 384th Bomb Group. And I have people waiting in line to get those, but they're mine as long as I can hang on to them.
So when did you get an assignment to go to the European front then?
Well, it was about the time we were down in crew training, and we had completed our training because we were on the ball, as you might say, and they got our stuff done ahead of time. And it was about the time the Battle of the Bulge hit over there and had trouble. They wanted crews and airplanes over there in a hurry, and so they moved us. All of a sudden one day they said, "You're going to Savannah, Georgia. You're going to pick up a B-17 there and proceed to Europe." And we were on a train. We arrived at Savannah in the afternoon, and my co-pilot didn't have a dental appointment that night at midnight. The next morning we got up and went out to the flight line to 5510, and we took it up and flew it for 2.5 hours, and basically to swing the compass, the fluxate compass, so we'd have the right navigation, because we would have there was no communication. German subs had all frequencies blocked when we flew across, and so we flew across. So we went up, swung that, and we got it. And then the next morning we left for Grenier Field, New Hampshire. And I have here that's the flight plan that I filed when we flew from Hunter Field, Savannah, Georgia, to Grenier Field, New Hampshire.
Was this your responsibility to provide the information?
No, there was a briefing officer on there, and then I had to sign that I was responsible for. I think it was $1 million worth of equipment that I signed for, and that was this is to certify that I was aware of all that I needed to know to make that flight, and this was the weather briefing folder that they gave us with the weather on there, and that's another story in itself because it shows the freezing level. The whole thing is when you go down, and when I arrived up there, visibility was bad, and when it cleared up the next day or so and I could see what I'd landed in amongst, I was glad I wasn't aware of it at the time. Back behind here shows a flight path from down here at Savannah, Georgia
To Bangor.
up to Bangor when I landed at Grenier Field here. And I have been back and revisited all the bases that I was at when I served in the war, except Goose Bay. And I passed a chance on that here a while back to go up and help dig out the P-38, but common sense said I was too old to go up there and do that.
At Bangor, Maine, I imagine you refueled there for your flight across the Atlantic.
No, we went up to Goose Bay. From Grenier Field, we went up to Goose Bay. And they didn't, at that point in time, they didn't know what the jet stream was. They just knew that once in a while that there was a strong wind blowing up there. And as you can see by the highs and lows on there, that was sort of mounted to. And so we got up there, and I said, well, now, I said, there was snow every place. It was in February, and up there, like you get that far, there's not much daylight. And so you don't know what time of day it really is. And I know they had 30-foot snowbanks on each side of the runway. And but I went to bed, got some sleep, and I said, "You wake me when you need me?" Yep. I woke up and nobody around, so I got up dressed and come out, and they said, "What are you doing here? You're supposed to be at a briefing. You're flying across today." And I said, "Uh-oh." I think that's the only time that I was late or letting my crew down in any way, shape, or form. When I got in there, the only thing I needed in the briefing that they give the whole thing was the fact they said, when you get to England, there's going to be 2 airports over there. Don't land on the one on the right, run on the left. And so I used that, and that was fine.
How old were you at this time?
I was 19, just turned 20. Yeah.
And this was your first flight, first crew, and you're taking off across the Atlantic Ocean.
Yes, I had an armor gunner who had 4 years of college, and I was just out of high school. Well, I'd had a year and a half or so of flight training.
Yeah. I had a thought, when they were forming or putting the crew together and training the crew, did they have any training or any sessions on how to work with a group of the rest of the crew, how to get along with them, what not to do and what to do?
This was done quite extensively because they said I had a little booklet that told you what you could expect, what they had to accomplish through their training. Is the one you will have the most trouble with will be the person who will be your co-pilot, because except for a chance to make something, he would be sitting in the left seat. He was in basic flight training at the same school, the same time when I was flying BT-13s, and I've got a picture of him. And I didn't know him because separated by the alphabet, but they put me in twin engine. They didn't him. He wound up as my co-pilot. And but then he went and they made an instructor out of him. So I had the world's best co-pilot. He was an instructor, and before he got into that, he had went through engineering school. So I really had my engineer and him as an engineer on the plane. So I was in good hands as far as that goes.
Would you say that the crew showed you the respect all the time they reported under you?
We never had any trouble with all of that. They never referred to me in any other word except commander. That was it. And I made a purpose of it that I try. Whenever we got to a new base, I usually went and made sure that they had accommodations, they had a place that they were eating. And I used to, when I got overseas, I'd take my suit off so that they didn't know I was an officer, and I'd go and eat with enlisted men to make sure that they were getting the meals that I was getting.
Who was the oldest on your crew?
I guess my co-pilot was. There wasn't a whole lot of difference in our ages, and he was the only one that would maybe physically. He was the one when we run the distance. He could beat me. He was the only one on the crew that could beat me. But sometimes some of those things are subtle things that you let happen because he needed. He said you were going to have trouble with your co-pilot if you have trouble with anybody because he's not going to be given a fair shake. He's not a thing.
In your first flight across the Atlantic, of what altitude did you fly at?
We started out at about 10, and then we wound up at about 15,000 feet. And my navigator, he was on oxygen all the way going across because he wanted to keep his brain clear. I had a tremendous navigator, I think. But of course, he always said, and at one time later on, he says, "Don, go up and fly the plane for me." I was checking somebody else so I can get a wind. He can't hold a heading for nothing. Bob and I, my co-pilot, we always held it within a half a degree one side or the other of the heading. And he was a good navigator.
How long did it take you to go that first flight?
It was 12 hours across when we flew across. When we left Goose Bay, it was 12 hours later. We landed with something over 20 minutes to a half hour of fuel because when we first took off, we didn't have the tailwind we were supposed to have. And so you get out there so far, and you say, now, well, this is point of no return. You got to go on no matter what. And you could see choppy water down there. You could see ice in the water. And it was interesting. 2 years ago, when my wife and I went to Denmark, we flew. he flew almost the same course that I flew, and they had a little diagram in the front of the plane that showed as it went across, and one hit Zulu time, and one thing another, and I relived a lot of memories when we done that.
So what airfield were you assigned to in England?
That was at Grafton Underwood. It was a little town of Kettering near Northampton, and it had been a British base, and then the 97th Bomb Group had flown off of there, and then they were reassigned down to North Africa, and then the 384th moved in there.
How many B-17s would have been in the 384th approximately?
Well, when we put up a full flight to go on a mount bombing mission, we would have 36 airplanes. We'd have 12, 24, 36. And there'd be group up here, group here, and group here. And that was the way we flew it. And then we always were staggered behind another group of the same amount.
Was there any particular place in the formation that was more dangerous to be in than another? Or?
Well, yes. When we got on the bombing run, we stacked 3, 3, and then another 3. And if one of those planes slid back, the bomb bays would be open right above you, and if the bombs were released, they come down. Another thing I didn't like is when you were flying behind something like that, you come up and the tail gunner have those 50 calibers pointed right at you sitting in the pilot's seat, and you couldn't break radio silence, so I just pulled a plane up and get it very close to the guns and wave at him. I mean, he was no further away than, he was probably 15 feet away from me, and I could motion to him to get those guns out of my face.
So how long were you at Grafton before they told you to go to work? Your first mission.
First thing we had to do, we had to go fly a couple of practice missions to see whether we could fly formation. And I spent quite a bit of time in the link trainer to see if I could fly instruments. And so really, the crew got after me a little bit. They said, we've been here long enough. They were eager. They wanted to fly before the war got over. After all, I got there at the very end. And I just got in on the glory that the others had really done. Because even though we lost an awful lot of crews on their first mission, and whatever, because at the end of the war, Colonel Milton, he's now a retired 4-star general, he told me out at the academy here some years ago, he says, down at the last of the war, they were telling the Germans what target we were going to hit at what time to get the people out of there. And so all they had to do was set up their flak guns, and all they had to figure out was their altitude to hit us.
Did you wear any type of protection against flak?
Oh yes, when we got airborne and got to 10,000 feet, we put on our oxygen mask. Then we put on our flak suits, and we had a flak helmet that we put on too. And so we were pretty well covered up that way. But none of that ever saved my life. But Sergeant Ruby did with a piece of sheet metal that I sat on, and so I have a soft place in my heart for him.
Yeah. These flak jackets, are they similar to the Kevlar bulletproof jackets they have now? Or?
What I think of is when you go to the dentist and they put that little heavy jacket over you to take an x-ray, they were heavy. They were not light ones like the newer ones are. They were heavy weighted ones.
Another thing I wanted to ask you, you had mentioned the weather chart there when you first took off for England. When you speak of weathermen now, you kind of, with tongue-in-cheek, when you got a forecast from the weather people, did you feel that everybody feels this could be pretty much relied on?
The weather that we received on the flight across the Atlantic was just exactly on the button the entire way across. And because we went back, as we went across, we had to increase altitude. I think the clouds might have got to be a little higher, and we had to go higher to stay VFR. And because after all, we had planes that took off from Goose Bay, I forget how, not too far apart, and I never seen one of them all the rest of the way going over to England. Yeah.
So when did you make your first bombing?
That would have been the 19th of April, 1945. I had to fly with another crew. I flew with a lieutenant colonel. I had to fly one mission before I could fly, take my own crew. And I flew with Lieutenant Carlson, and here was where the training, what I had done in cadets paid off, had a cadet that couldn't fly from the right seat, and so I flew from the right seat quite a little bit. And on a check ride with a bomb group, that I had to fly out from the right seat, and also on that, he was flying. We had 3, 3, and 3, and he was flying element lead out here. And we got on the target. We got hit with flak real bad, and the 3 gunners in the waist were cut up bad. And he says, "I've got to go back and patch him up." So he left me on my first mission, flying element lead out there. He went back to help patch up the guys that got hit. And
Could you, would it have been possible to fly above the flak, or?
no.
That's out of the question.
No, our planes weren't capable. I had a B-17 they said it would go to 40,000 feet, but 30,000 feet was as high as I ever had. And most of our bombing missions were from 18 to 23, 24,000 feet.
And when you went on a bombing mission, you could pretty much expect flak on
Flak was
every
going
one
to
of
be
them.
there. Fighters were non-existent as of, the first year in March. By the first one, well, they seen some of the German jets in February, but their fighters were non-existent. We had control of the air.
You had no escort, or did you have any escort?
Yes, P-51s followed us all the way in and back, and by that time they had changed it a little bit. If there wasn't a problem, they always had a high cover over us, and the only excitement it would cause would be they practiced too, and they'd practice gunning runs on us. And one of them was doing this to my tail gunner. He was a big boy from Tennessee, and he stood 6'2" or 3" and weighed 200 and something, and he was the only one on the crew that I might have had trouble with at all. And the colonel down in crew training says, "Don't you want him off your crew? You got such a good crew." I said, "No, sir." I said, "I can't think of anybody I'd rather have on my back than him if we got in trouble, because he could do a lot of work." And he says, "If that 51 doesn't break off, I'm going to open up on it." But it broke off in time, so he didn't have to.
Would they follow you right into the target, or would they back off with them?
They usually didn't go into the target with because there was flak there. They'd go down and take targets of opportunity then, which was not that bad a choice on their part.
And then you would pick them up on the way back.
On the way back, yeah.
How much fuel did a B-17 carry, and how many nautical miles could you expect it to take you, or number of hours you could have on a fully loaded?
A typical mission run, the last mission that we flew was 9 hours and 45 minutes, and that's usually about what a mission was. We flew across, it took 12 hours, and we carried 3,780 gallons of gas. And we had, in crew training, had experimented with extending the cruise limitation on an airplane so that you see how far we could go. And we found out that if you didn't fly too fast and went down with RPM, so those props were almost flat standing out there, but we couldn't do that in formation. But we only once did I think they had a problem with fuel. They changed bomb loads, and I think we were overloaded one morning, and it was a normal British morning, foggy and cloudy and rainy, and the plane that had taken off ahead of me hit trees at the end of the runway. He come around and landed 50 feet in front of me with a full gas load and bomb load, and I had to sit there to wait to pull out on the runway. And I think we might have been overweight that day.
If you ever had to board a mission, did they just tell you to dump your fuel before you come back, or dump your bombs in it?
We had designated places that we could drop our bombs in the channel, this type of thing, yeah.
But you weren't allowed to bring them back with you.
Well, you tried not to. You tried not to, because usually if you were turning back for whatever reason, like usually had something wrong, you wanted the least amount of weight on that airplane that you could have.
You were talking about there's 36 planes in a formation. Was there any reason for 36 pilots to be communicating amongst themselves, or did the flight chiefs do that? Or
we were still supposed to keep radio silence, period, on the thing, and there was no. I always wore what they call split headsets. One for outside in case something came to me, and the other one was on intercom within the crew. And we tried to keep. It was not like any of your movies that you see at 12 o'clock high. I mean, the bickering like that didn't go on within the crew and the petty stuff that they had there. a group of us refused to go to the premiere showing of that in one place where we were at a bomb group reunion because I don't think you found anybody in the 8th Air Force that really thought it was a proper movie. It gave a scenario, but it wasn't the way things really were.
You have a photo here that had a story behind it.
Yeah, this is a photo of Sergeant Ruby. Sergeant Ruby is the one in the middle, and he was the one that took care of the plane on the ground, and he usually would come up between the co-pilot and me before we take off and tell me any problems that we might have with the airplane and what we could expect. And he always carried with him a piece of plate steel that he put underneath my seat, and that saved me that one day because the flak hit that, and it was a piece of flak that was about the size of your thumb, like that. And when it hit that, it was spent and laid on the floor there beside the seat. If that hadn't been for that sheet metal, I probably wouldn't be here today. But I put that in a footlocker to send home, and somebody took it away from me when it was being shipped back.
When the before a mission, in a little slack time, if you the crew spent any time in a bar consuming any alcohol, was there any number of hours that you could not drink prior to flight, or?
Well, no, I don't think it was. You more or less, I think common sense told you what you had to do, because I know that I was not a drinking person anyway, and I never took a drink all the time until after the war was over. And that was I never had anything but a Coke, because I said the lives of 9 other guys are depending on me to make sure everything happens.
Did the rest of the crew, they feel the same way, or did they?
I think so. We had a crew that there was nobody on my crew smoked, and that was unusual. That was unusual.
I could. What was the optimum bombing altitude when you'd go over a target? At what altitude do the planes normally fly at?
It would have been around between 20 and 25,000 feet. That was usually where we were at.
And then how long would it take for the formation to unload their bombs and turn around?
Oh, we would be, seemed like an eternity, but we usually had, we had an initial point, the IP, and then the target. And it was usually made like a dog leg, where you, like this, so they wouldn't know for sure where we were headed for. And during those period of time, we flew tight formation, set altitude, and everything. And that was when we made no evasive actions, and that's when we took the worst hitting with flak.
What country or what did you do you remember any targets, where the targets were, or what country they were in?
The last one was Pilsen's Czechoslovakia, and the interesting thing about that is that we bombed that target, and my son's father-in-law had been displaced by the Germans several different times and was over there at that time. I think he was within 60 or 100 miles southwest of that target. And a fellow that I go to church with every Sunday was a prisoner of war in a camp about 100 miles the other way from the target. And I thought this kind of ironic. And just like I found out, you run onto strange things like that all the time.
Yeah. One other B-17 bomber pilot we was talking to mentioned the fact that when the planes would unload their bombs and they'd come down out of the bomb rack, the noise was horrendous. The rattling of the bombs down out of the bomb. Could that be heard over the engine noise, or?
I never associated with it. I guess I had too much else on my mind. But you definitely felt when the bombs went, your plane, you had to watch it because the loss of weight, it wanted to go up unless you caught it with control. It was like an updraft.
Did you ever have the occasion to fly over the White Cliffs at Dover?
Oh yes, we have flown over that many times, and it's the fun part about all of this. So you talk about the channel. I've crossed the channel everywhere you can except swimming it. I've flown over it lots of times, and I went over on hovercraft. And the last time we were over there, we went through the channel, as they call it over there. And it only takes 20 minutes to go into there. And so you go 33 miles in 20 minutes. And we also brought a chunk of the White Cliffs of Dover back to the state. Our bomb group did. We have that in the museum out at Hill Air Force Base, and there's one down at Savannah, Georgia, this being dedicated the 18th of this month, which I won't get to go to because I'll be out at the Air Force Academy instead.
When was your your group made the last bombing run in
Yes.
World War II?
Yes.
Yeah.
That was the 25th of April, 1945, 11:17.
Did you know it at the time that was be the last?
No, we didn't. I think I wrote an article about it that the morning was just like any other, except there wouldn't be any mission coming over for tomorrow. And we weren't in on the know a lot of things. We just done what we were told.
When you come back from an assignment and you had a debriefing, did they let you know how successful you were on your last bombing run?
Yeah, this was interesting. So with the plane, we always had a couple of planes that had cameras in it. And this is how I have some of the pictures that I have, because when the bomb group was, I was over for occupation. When that closed up, I had access to get some of the pictures. I wished I'd taken more, but I didn't. But they had what they called a hot camera ship. And he would hurry back, and because there was no fighters to worry about at that time. So they could hurry back, and when we got on the ground, they would have photos developed and show what we'd done.
As far as your maps, were they of your targets? Were they very reliable, other than the weather interrupting?
They were. A lot of the pictures that I've seen of targets, the Germans did an awful lot with smoke down there to camouflage that. And let's face it, a lot of times the weather was cloud cover over there, and we bombed by what they called Mickey and one thing. And I couldn't understand it all, but my navigator could read the blips on there, associate that with a map, and this is what they do. And of course, the lead navigator would be the one that was responsible for that, and the lead bombardier, and we all toggled bombs on him.
Of these 36 planes in a formation, who would have been the top gun? Who would have been the...
There was usually a colonel at the head of it, our squadron commander, or someone. Well, one time, Colonel come in, he'd completed his tour, wanted to go on one more mission, and so he had us flying, and he flew when there were fighters. And as we were approaching the target, they had a group that was up here, and he held us down here rather than over here. And it was a good thing, because over here is where all the flak hit. And he avoided the flak for the simple reason that he was thinking about fighters coming out of the sun.
Was there segregation in the Air Force?
There were, the colored person didn't have anything to do. He had, I think they were basically engineers that had worked on the ground or done something like this. I don't think there was a colored person in our bomb group at all. If there was, he was a cook, and I never seen him.
Were you aware of the Tuskegee Institute in...
Not until after the war was over, no. And not until, and I've seen the movie and read as much as I can about it.
How about rest and relaxation? What did you get to do in your time off? Was there any places to go that is...
Well, we got leave to go. Well, when it got to be VE Day, then I was one of the fortunate ones that got to go to London and be in front of Buckingham Palace when all the throng was in there to celebrate the end of the war. Doesn't mean I can't think where it was at.
If you would have had to put your plane down or crashed a plane, you would have been in strange territory. Did they provide you with any information as to the countryside that you were in, as to how to get out of there? Or?
We were usually handed a packet that contained maps that were made out of silk that would cover the terrain area where we were going over. And someplace in the house I got one for it's around Pilsen, Czechoslovakia, and Berlin, shows the whole area. And it would show you, and it's interesting for the people that lived back at that time and knew that country, because it was the way it was then, and it's interesting compared to what has happened to it today.
Where were you when the Tibbets dropped the atomic bomb in Japan? Were you still in England at that time?
No, by that time we'd been reassigned for occupation, and we'd been moved down to Istres, France. And I found out about it. I was at the Riviera having fun there in one of the hotels that we'd taken over. The Air Force had an Army Air Corps at that time. And there's a picture someplace of co-pilot and I. They were celebrating. We've got points. We're going home. And
So when did you get to come home or discharged?
I came home in the middle of the year in the summertime of 1946, and so I wanted to get home here in time because I was going to enter the University of Iowa into law school.
And what rank had you reached when you?
I was still a first lieutenant. If I'd waited another 2 weeks, I would have been promoted to captain. But I said, no, I'm going home when I got a chance, and so I came home.
And you come back to Alburnett.
I came back to Alburnett, yeah.
Did anybody or any of your friends or neighbors, were they surprised what young Donnie Thompson had done for himself?
It's interesting on that because it always been known that I wanted to fly an airplane when I was going through school, and at that point in time, before December 7th, 41, I figured I was going to be an airline pilot. I'd probably wind up marrying an airline stewardess. That's what they figured. That was in our yearbook or something like that, I think. And the superintendent, when he found out that I was going to get into training like that, he says, "Fine, I don't think he'll make it because he hasn't got what it takes." I finished the top pilot and sixth from the top academically out of 250 pilots. So this is what I point out to the young people that I talk to. You can get what you want if you go after it.
So did you take advantage of the GI Bill?
I started the school and I'd saved enough money. I had 7 years of college. Only I was going to take it in 5 down to University of Iowa. I was going to be a lawyer. And I was midterm in one of them down in, about time in the combine and beans. And my dad had an accident, slipped off the combine, broke his hip. I came home and never went back. I stayed on the farm. They even sent the lady head of the speech department down to the University of Iowa out to see why I quit, because I was her favorite student. As you can tell, I like to talk.
So what year did you get married?
I got married in 1950, and I met my wife. She was teaching school here in Marion, and in this little school building over there now, it's the senior center over there is what it is. And a girl she had went to college with, her folks lived there, and so she roomed in that girl's room. Mm-hmm. And it was through her that I met Irene, and it went from there.
Was she from a farming family?
She was farming family from Mount Pleasant, Iowa. Mm-hmm. She was born and raised on a farm.
Mm-hmm. So you ended up on the home place?
Yes, I did. Yeah.
And was this a century farm?
No, that one wasn't. We'd had that about 75 years, I guess. And one of the farms that we have a sign over a Century Farm, but that was my wife's farm down there. They had one of them was 100 years and one of them was about 150 years. Mm-hmm. In fact, some of my wife's relation came over on the Mayflower, so they can trace their stuff back a long ways. I haven't tried too much. I can't find it out. I've tried but can't.
Did you, was you into grain farming or livestock or?
Well, at first, when my wife and I got married, we had a full range of everything. We had chickens and we had hogs and my dad and I, well, even as a youngster, we went out to Nebraska. We'd go out west and buy cattle. Dad was a cattle buyer, and we would buy and sell cattle, and so we had a full complement of things that way. And little by little, I think the chickens went first, and then the milk cows, and then finally the hogs, and then I couldn't make the trips out there to buy cattle, and so I finally went to grain farming altogether.
At the same time, you were very active in the reserves, weren't you?
Yes. Yeah. I went to school to a training session every Monday night for, better than 23, 4 years, something like that. I had 26 years in the reserve. And there's some of the years in there I didn't do anything. And then it said, you're either going to get involved or we're going to lose your commission. And I worked awful hard to get that. I said, I'm going to try to save it, and so I did. Mm-hmm.
And then could you still gain rank by staying in the reserve?
Yes, I did. Yeah. As I went through it, every so many years, as you come up for promotion, if you completed certain courses, then you would get promoted. And if I had made captain when I got out, actually, if I got all the promotions I should have got, if I'd have been a congressman or senator, I should have been a one-star general, because I had taken all the courses to complete that. But as it was, I was a lieutenant colonel. I was in Washington, D.C. for approval, for that. There was 37 of us. I think we were being promoted at that time. And a general bombed an unauthorized target over in Vietnam, and the Congress and Senate got upset. They froze all promotions, active and reserve, went past my retirement date, so then I was done. I had to retire at that. I went out to Denver and talked to him about it out there. And this is when I found out a lot about me, is I got to read all the stuff the instructors had written about me. And I didn't know that I was quite the person that I was.
You were also very active in the Civil Air Patrol, weren't
Yes.
you?
Yes. I run through all the things except wing commander for the Civil Air Patrol, but I served as the inspector for the Iowa wing for overall of Iowa. And I was also the one that the Scott Air Force called in case there was a downed or missing airplane in Iowa. And so I took part in all of that.
Did you ever, did you own a plane while you were farming? Or
No, I didn't.
Did you have access to a plane?
The Civil Air Patrol, I knew the general that was the Civil Air Patrol general and the Air Force general involved, head of Civil Air Patrol. I went through cadets with them, so I had a pretty open hand as to what I could do. I'd done some things that were not quite fundraisers that we weren't supposed to do, and we supported on our own 4 airplanes here in the Cedar Rapids area at that time.
Did you know Ed Whistler that was very active in the Civil Air Patrol?
Very well, yes.
Did you ever have the opportunity to take your wife and fly around the country?
Yes, we would do this because she had to be a member of Civil Air Patrol to do this toward the end. But we had one plane, it was an 01, and it was a military observation plane. It was a hot rod, and I heard one comment she liked about it. I said, "We got a headwind. We're going to Sioux City." I said, "We're going to not get above 500 feet the whole way out there." And she enjoyed that. She says, "You could just see the women hanging clothes on the line, everything about it." I scared her once, though, when I was going to land at Mount Pleasant, and I made the comment, a pilot hates to back taxi on a runway, and the turnoff into the terminal was about a third of the way down the runway where I was landing, and I said, "Oh, I'm not going to make it." They thought I wasn't going to make the field. I meant the turnoff. I made the turnoff, and the whole nation says, "Don't ever say anything like that again." So,
Did you ever go up to Oshkosh to the air shows?
My daughter, who is with Customs, they have a public relations building up there, and I went up there as their Air Force official. I was supposed to know everything about it. I'd get the people in Oshkosh from Customs into the airplanes of World War II, and they always let me go in freehand to look at it. And I knew the Pobreski's up there, and they allowed me to fly on the B-17 in the air show up there one year. That was in '88, I think, and I had a lot of fun with that. This is the same B-17 that was in Cedar Rapids here just this fall, the fall of 2002, and no, it was fall of 2001. Yeah, but they allowed me to go out and sit in the cockpit. Nobody else got to, but I did, and talk to the people about it there.
This certificate there, would you?
I received a notice one day that those of us that were could send conforming information that we were there during that period of time, that the French government wanted to recognize us with this, and so I went out to Des Moines and got to meet the Consulate General from France and the governor of the Iowa, and it was quite a day. And as it lucked out, I got to sit in the front row. And the only bad thing about it is I promised the guy some pictures, and I lost his card, so I can't send him the pictures. I've been privileged. One of the perks of being in the reserve and retiring from it is our bomb group has sponsored the outstanding cadet in the biology department out at the Air Force Academy for quite a number of years, 30-some years, I think. And I've been privileged for the last 3 years, and I'll be going again this year. This is the year of 2000, and it's Tracy Tiniano. Not only was she the outstanding cadet in the biology department, she was the outstanding cadet of the entire academy graduating that year. She had a twin sister, and I think they had a lot of fun because they looked so much alike you couldn't tell them apart. wonderful people out there. And when we go to some of the functions, this is how my wife and I dress up for them to be a part of the. This was taken on a cruise up in Alaska last year. The one state we had not been in, so we got up there. And so I put on my mess dress and had a lot of fun with the crew. But this is the way I look when I go to the Air Force and represent them. Have a lot of fun with it.
Did you, the 384th, do they have reunions yearly, or?
I'm on the board. I'm the liaison officer for the Air Force Academy for the presenting of that award out there. I'm on the board, and we have a reunion every other year and a board meeting on the off year. And so we get together quite often, and there's been 4 of my crew members have gotten to the reunions, but health-wise it's starting to catch up with a lot of them, and we have a concern about who's going to present the awards now, and we're starting a new tradition perhaps that we will. In the year 2003, we're working on having one of the first cadets who received the award. He is now a full colonel and a doctor, and we're going to have him maybe present the award in the year 2003. We'll discuss that at our board meeting when we meet this September.
How many of your crew is still living?
My co-pilot is gone, and my bombardier, I lost him because he changed his name, and haven't found him since then. And tail gunner, he was from Tennessee, and I don't know where he's at. But there's 5 of us that I know who are still been in contact with. Yeah.
You were telling me in our pre-interview about renovating a church in somewheres in England.
We, next to our bomb base over there in England, the Duke of Buccleuch owns all that land. He's one of the largest landholders in England. He probably owns more land than the Queen does. But he's been incapacitated. He got thrown from a horse. And there was a church there that next to our base, and we completely rebuilt that, and we wanted to put a stained glass window in it in the process. They didn't really want a B-17 in their church window. And we said, tell us about the window over on the other side of it. It's a knight and a white horse and a knight. I said, different time, different technology. And so the stained glass window was in there. Pentagon found out about it, and they said, we would like to have a chapel restored out at Hill Air Force Base. Would you do this for us out there? And we said, yes, we could do that. So we went out there and restored that. And if you ever get to Hill Air Force Base out there, you want to go see that chapel, because the stained glass window is enclosed so that it can't be seen from the outside, but so it's protected. But we have totally restored that with bells and chimes and the whole thing out. It's and there's a museum out there you ought to see. And we're doing the same thing down at Savannah, Georgia now. They're building a stone church down there like they had over in England. And there's 4 stained glass windows in there. The 384th has one in there. It's going to be dedicated the 18th of May of this year.
Don, would you like to introduce your wife?
I certainly would, because, you know, the comment's always been made that behind every good man is a wonderful wife, and I would not be where I'm at or accomplished what I did without her loving care and keeping me out of trouble and doing a lot of things for me. One thing she didn't like to do was drive the tractor on the farm. She'd find an excuse not to do that, though.
Did you have any problem keeping up with him, Irene?
Well, yes, pretty much. I liked to go flying with him when he had the plane from the Civil Air Patrol.
Did you like to fly?
I was not a real flying bug like he is, but I enjoyed a little of it, and I like to be able to get out to our daughters in Nebraska in a hurry without sitting in the car all day, so that's fun.
And you had the opportunity to raise the children on the farm.
Right.
Nell Burnett.
It was a good place to raise a family.
Yeah. Let's introduce him. I'd like to have Don hold some pictures up of, and Irene, you can tell who is on the picture.
That's our oldest daughter, Janice, and her husband, and their daughter Christine. They live in a Chicago suburb, and she and her husband both work for Customs.
I'm real proud of my daughter there. She is the assistant
Operations
of Customs in Chicago. There's only about 15 of them like her in the United States.
And this is?
This is our middle daughter, and her family. She's a teacher. She followed in my footsteps. Her husband and the 3 children are, Carrie is the oldest, and she's a junior in college right now, and their boy is graduating next week from high school, and the youngest is a freshman, and they're real active in all kinds of school activities.
Very good.
And this is our son and his wife, Debbie, their little daughter, Caitlin, who will be 5 in a couple of weeks, and we'll have to go down there for a birthday party, I guess. Is a Zales jewelry man, and we're real proud of them too.
I think, this is a picture here of I thought was real neat.
The three grandchildren in Nebraska. Donna's 3. When I think that's a really nice picture of them.
Carrie in there, she's a pole vaulter, and she's not done Olympic style, but it's got her scholarships. That's what counts.
These 2 are the other 2 cousins, and they like to get together and play. So they wanted their picture taken together, and we did that at Christmas a year ago. Caitlin and Christine.
Good. So what year did you retire from farming?
I didn't farm in the year 96, wasn't it?
Right.
And I rented the farm out, and I thought, well, everything worked pretty good that way. And then I decided that it was time to, there were a lot of things needed to be done, so we had a sale and got rid of the farm in 97.
And did you have the opportunity to do any traveling after you'd retired?
We've always been a family to travel a lot.
When I had summers off from teaching and in between farm work, we always tried to get away we liked to go out to the Rocky Mountains. But we took a 5-week trip the year when we first moved to town because he had a reunion in Salt Lake City and another one down in Southern California. So we toured up, visited a cousin of mine in Seattle, and made a big vacation.
We had a lot of fun. We went back to where I started flying with Orion, and there were 5 of us from the Cedar Rapids area that had went through there and flown the Orion that he had out there. Can't say his name now. Mike Wilson. And so we had a lot of fun with that. I even got to see one of my instructors out there, and it was kind of interesting. That's the only base that has not changed a lot, only except the trees have grown taller. Yeah. It was very nice to be able to go back to it. You
had mentioned the fact that you had turned down the opportunity to resurrect the plane from New Greenland?
Yeah. There was a colonel, when I was involved as a Civil Air Patrol, the Colonel Air Force side up in Minneapolis was the head of the North Central region and through here. And he says, Don, would you like to go? He'd been up there the summer before. He said, would you like to go up there and be involved? I said, I sure would, but I said, common sense says that you don't want to do that because that would have been in the year of 93. And in 1994, I had 5 bypasses. So I probably would not have made it if I'd have went up there. And common sense told me I had to back off from that.
You had mentioned your friend Mike Wilson. He was very active in that project, wasn't he?
Yes, he was. Mm-hmm.
If you had to do your life over again, would you have done anything different, or was there anything you didn't get to accomplish that you wish you would have?
Oh, I think there's a lot of what ifs, I think, as all of us live our life. And I said, well, what would have happened if I'd have kept on going to law school and if I had went and flew well, I couldn't fly for the airlines because I needed 4 years of college at that time. And no, if I had changed some of that, or even stayed active duty, I might not have met my wife. And I think this would have been a disappointment because I feel that what Irene and I have done together has been very worthwhile and a happy and good life. And we raised 3 wonderful kids out on a farm where I was born and raised. And the joy of it is we have a young couple that's bought the farm, and they are starting a family, just starting now with that little one that's just a month or 2 old. And it's the way I would like to have it be.
Very good. Unless you have anything to add, the Cedar Rapids History Center, the Linn County Historical Society would like to thank you very much, and thank you, Irene, for sharing your memories with us.
Glad we could do so.